After a couple goalless draws in the Cup, including a loss in the final against Napoli, Juventus returned to league play with a 2-0 victory over Bologna on Monday. Ronaldo from the penalty spot and Dybala the goal scorers. Juve now 4 points clear of Lazio, who have a game in hand. They face Atalanta on Wednesday. Gab Marcotti, Shaka, Hislop join us for more. Gab, it was Juve's best performance since the restart, although admittedly, that's not really saying much.
Yeah, it's not much of a sample size, and as you said, the first two games were rather poor from Juve in the Coppa Italia. But here they were very professional. We saw them with a more rational lineup, with Paulo Dybala playing through the middle, Douglas Costa on the bench, Bernardeschi joined the front three, and Cristiano back to where Cristiano likes to play. And I think they were also helped a little bit by the fact that Bologna came at them, sort of rather swashbuckling, as if they had nothing to lose. I think that played into Juve's hands a little bit. But they played very well, and certainly Dybala scored a tremendous goal. Ronaldo with his penalty earlier, and they managed the game well, and they were efficient and professional, and showing a lot of the traits that perhaps we hadn't seen in the two Coppa Italia matches.
Shaka, what'd you make of the Juve performance?
I thought it was good, especially considering the disappointing games we'd seen from them so far. Gab's right. Bologna didn't offer much of a challenge, particularly going forward. And as swashbuckling as it may have been, I thought it lacked any real ideas, a front three that spread out across the park, and didn't really test Bonucci or De Ligt in a manner that you would hope. Listen, I sit here and I admit I've been very critical of De Ligt, particularly in the past, but I thought he equipped himself well, as did Juventus, and they made easy work of it. And the one thing that Juventus does is when they get the noses in front, they're generally hard to beat, and that's what you saw from them, especially what you saw over recent weeks. You take this every single time.
Gab, reports recently of a dust-up between Pjanic and Sarri. Sarri has come out and said it's a hoax. Pjanic in the lineup today. What do we make of it? Something there or no?
I mean, there's no question Pjanic hasn't played particularly well, and I think a lot of people put two and two together, and they talk about contractual issues. They talk about interest from Barcelona. I don't see necessarily why it should affect you on the pitch. It's from Juve's perspective, it's pretty clear that if they get a replacement, they're not going to stand in his way of him leaving. So I don't necessarily buy that, but it's pretty obvious. I mean, look, the midfield's been one of the poorest areas, probably the poorest area of the pitch for Juve in their games back. And Pjanic he's the pianist, right? He's the guy who conducts the whole midfield. So obviously it's going to fall on him. So while Sarri went out of his way to sort of minimize these stories and pour water on the fire, as you expect, I would hope that they had stern words and said, hey, look, we're not getting the job done. Pjanic, what can you do better? What can Sarri do better to help you in terms of the players who are around you and what happens in front of you? I don't think Pjanic's poor performances are entirely Pjanic's fault, but equally he did turn in poor performances, and perhaps Sarri in the two games that in the Coppa Italia didn't exactly help that.
Shaka, we mentioned Cristiano Ronaldo on the score sheet. He gets the penalty. Look, he hasn't looked like himself since the return to play. How did you rate his performance today, and did you see any signs of life, any signs of that old Ronaldo?
No, on this performance, not that much. And it's clear, he's still trying to get himself up to speed, but that doesn't concern me as much as maybe it would or should under different circumstances. If Juventus were chasing Lazio, for instance, or they didn't pick up 3 points today, then all of a sudden I think alarm bells start ringing. But we always said from this lockdown, as it happened when it came, nobody knew what the other side would look like. And also, if you think of Ronaldo's own form over recent seasons, coming off of pre-season, coming into a new season, generally he doesn't start that quickly, and he picks up, and it's the second half of the season where he's at his best. So again, though we were in the second half of the season, we're coming off a lengthy break, and Ronaldo quite clearly hasn't found his full stride yet. That for me is less a concern. There's still a few weeks to go between Juventus entertain Lazio, and that's when you need him at his best. Right now, Lazio, Juventus, look like they continue to chain up wins.
Gab, so much talk about where Ronaldo plays today. What'd you rate?
I mean, he was back in his usual position. Dybala was playing center forward, whether you want to call it false nine because he moves around a lot. Is up to you. But ultimately, in this system of play, you need a central striker who's going to make the right runs and who's going to, always look to try to favor the midfielders bursting forward and making those runs into the box. And equally, this system of play, it really benefits from having a guy popping up at the far post to finish, and that's what Cristiano Ronaldo does. So I think, he was more in his natural habitat. I agree with Shaka, and Sarri alluded to this as well. He's not at the fitness level that he wants to be at in terms of match fitness and match sharpness. But I'll tell you what, he's going to get there a whole heck of a lot faster if he does it playing in the position where he's best at rather than having to play center forward.
Gab, change gears real quick. Milan 4-1 winners over Leicester. Just a huge result for Milan as they try to get into the Europa League, and they do it without Zlatan.
Yeah, and look, I think they're going to have to live without Zlatan, next season, and it can't all be about Zlatan. Huge result, as you said. Samu Castillejo getting on the score sheet for the first time in I think more than a year for Milan. Took the lead, gave up the equalizer. But then they pushed on and they hit them 3 times. Rafael Leao getting on the score sheet. That's certainly very important as well. I was never as doom and gloom as people said in the past. I think Milan still feel that they're in with a shout to move up the table and maybe have a go at that Europa League spot. And certainly away to Lecce is one of those places where you expect them to get the 3 points if they're going to do that.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.